Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are jumping right into the absolute mechanics of resilience. We're going to be looking at a crazy journey, one that goes from absolute peak performance straight down to rock bottom, and then covers the incredibly grueling climb all the way back up. We're unpacking Marcus's story. And honestly, if you've ever faced a setback, and let's be real, who among us hasn't, this deep dive is totally going to change how you look at failure. Let's get right into it.
All right, Section 1, Unstoppable to Broken, the Fall of a Champion. So to really grasp the sheer scale of this comeback, we kind of need to set the scene and understand exactly where Marcus was starting from. At just 22 years old, Marcus wasn't just good, okay? He was literally the fastest sprinter in the entire country. Unstoppable was the word everyone kept throwing around. He was heavily scouted, sponsors were circling like crazy, and he was quite literally on the absolute verge of his ultimate dream. His whole life had basically built up to this one specific moment. And that brings us to this massive number right here, 50,000. That is exactly how many people were packed into the stadium for the championship finals. I mean, can you even imagine the weight of that pressure? Cameras flashing everywhere, millions more watching from their living rooms. The stadium is just buzzing. Marcus steps into the blocks, the starting gun fires, and he exploded off those blocks faster than he had ever had in his entire life. Everything was completely dialed in. But then we hit the 60-meter mark. At exactly 60 meters into the biggest race of his life, absolute disaster struck. He didn't trip. He wasn't bumped by someone else. It was something much, much worse. A sharp crack. Yeah, his leg just completely gave out beneath him. He collapsed right there on the track. Imagine being in that stadium. That massive crowd of 50,000 people instantly went dead silent. His knee was absolutely destroyed. And as he lay there on the track, just staring up at those blinding stadium lights, reality hit him. His season was over. And soon after, doctors would deliver a truly devastating prognosis, 12 months of recovery, maybe more. And just like that, the dream was shattered.
Which brings us to Section 2, the darkest point, 3 months of silence.
You know, the physical injury, that was actually just the beginning of the trauma. The world moves incredibly fast. Those scouts who were calling every single day, yeah, they stopped calling. His teammates, naturally, they had to move on with their own seasons. The sports world essentially just forgot about him. For 3 agonizing months, Marcus sat completely alone in his apartment. He kept the curtains tightly closed. He kept his phone completely turned off. It was literally just him and the silence, waking up every single morning asking himself, what's the point anymore? He was forced to sit there in the dark, watching his competitors on TV win the exact medals that were supposed to be hanging around his neck. It was a complete psychological collapse. He wasn't just physically broken. His entire sense of identity was just gone.
Moving on to Section 3, a single step forward, the catalyst.
So the actual mechanics of his comeback kicked off at like 2 a.m. in his dark apartment when Marcus stumbled upon an old video. It was a tape of him running, back when he was just 15 years old. And staring at that screen, he really had to compare these two versions of himself. On one hand, you had the 22-year-old star, burdened by sponsors, fame, and just this crushing pressure. That's the guy who broke on the track. But staring back at him from the TV was a 15-year-old kid who had absolutely nothing. No fame, no sponsors. All he had was just pure, unadulterated hunger and a genuine love for running. Marcus stared at that tape for a long time, realizing just how far he had drifted from that original, pure mindset.
Now, he didn't just magically wake up a champion again the next day. Actually, scratch that. He broke it down into visceral, physical mechanics. Step 1, he simply got up. Step 2, he slowly walked to his door. Step 3, he opened it. And step 4, he took just one single step outside. That is literally it. That was the whole shebang of his grand return to the world. But you see, that one single step broke 3 months of total paralysis. It proves that a massive, life-altering comeback, it always starts with a sequence of very small, incredibly deliberate actions.
The very next morning, Marcus picks up his phone, calls his old coach, and just says 5 words, I want to come back. And what's totally amazing here is the coach's response. After a moment of silence, his coach simply replied, I was waiting for this call. The support system was there the entire time, you guys, just waiting for Marcus to take that first internal step. All right, Section 4, the unseen grind, building the champion. We really got to strip away the whole Hollywood montage idea here and look at the actual grueling reality.
Day 1 of rehab was definitely not glorious. Marcus could barely even walk without intense pain. Every single step hurt. There were absolutely zero crowds cheering for him. No cameras, no applause. Just cold, clinical, completely excruciating physical therapy. But this specific philosophy from his coach kept him going. Champions aren't made when everything goes right. They are made in the moments when everything is falling apart, and they still show up. This right here, this became Marcus's absolute anchor. I mean, there were days he literally cried in the gym, days his body totally failed and he couldn't even finish the workout. But because of this mindset, he never, ever quit. He just kept showing up.
And this unseen grind gradually mapped out into a seriously grueling timeline. By month 3, he's finally jogging again for the first time since the injury. It was incredibly slow, and yeah, it was painful, but it was a win. Month 6, he's finally back on a real track. Now, he's not racing yet, he's just running, just feeling alive again. People in town started whispering, "Wait, is that Marcus? I thought he was completely done." But here's the thing. He wasn't training for their validation anymore. He was training for that 15-year-old kid. And by month 9, his times were finally returning to normal. Not 100% perfect, but man, so close. And then the window opened. The regional championships were officially announced. But the stakes were unbelievably high here. There was only one spot left open. He had exactly one single chance to qualify and prove to the world he was back. His coach looked at him and asked, "Are you ready?" And Marcus, completely unshakable after 9 solid months of absolute hell, simply smiled and said, "I was born ready."
Section 5, the final race, the return to the track. Now, this wasn't just any regular meet. It was race day, in the exact same stadium, on the exact same track where he had collapsed and destroyed his knee a year earlier. As he walked out onto that surface, all that trauma just flooded right back. He felt the exact same fear from that terrible night completely gripping him. But this time was fundamentally different. Because underneath all that fear, there was a new foundation, something totally unbreakable. All that agonizing rehab, the tears in the gym, the total loss of his ego, it had literally forged an iron core inside of him. When the gun fired this time, he wasn't running for the roar of the crowd, and he sure wasn't running for the scouts. He was running entirely for himself. The race is a total blur of adrenaline, but with exactly 20 meters to go, he was absolutely neck and neck with the leader. The stadium is roaring around him, exactly like it had before. But Marcus didn't panic. He dug deep into that unbreakable foundation, channeling every single scar and every painful morning of rehab, and he leaned forward. He crossed the finish line. The scoreboard lights up and flashes his name right next to these 2 words, first place. Marcus just stood there on the track, breathing super hard, tears just streaming down his face. And it is so important to understand this. He wasn't crying just because he won a race. He was crying because he absolutely refused to let that awful fall be his final story. He took his narrative back.
Which leads us to our final section, Section 6, Writing Your Own Comeback. The final lesson.
Listen, Marcus's journey proves one absolute universal truth. The comeback is always harder than the setback, but it is always worth it. And the reason we're unpacking this explainer today isn't just to talk about how great Marcus is. It applies directly to you. Because you watching this, you've fallen too. Maybe it wasn't on a running track in front of 50,000 screaming people. Maybe your fall happened in your career, in your personal life, or in a relationship. But you fell. That's just a fact of life. So the question isn't whether you fell. The question you have to ask yourself right now is this: are you ready to get back up? Because just like Marcus, your comeback story is sitting right there, waiting to be written. The mechanics are exactly the same. It starts with one small step, and it starts today. So think about that younger, hungrier version of yourself and go take that step. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will see you next time.